Everybody, thanks for joining us today in adapting to the new challenges in university recruiting. Excited to have Matt Spencer, CEO of Suited here, Colleen Grant from HubSpot, global leader of their university recruiting and programs, and of course, Doug Hall, our SVP of business development here at Comparably. We're just going to wait a few more minutes while some other folks jump on here and really get us started. So thank you all for joining. We're going to have a great conversation today and looking forward to the discussion. If you have questions as we go through this webinar, please use the Q&A located at the bottom of Zoom to submit your questions. I will try and get to all of them or as many of them as possible, but we're going to spend a good 45 minutes together, really digging in here and what's going on in university recruiting with some great folks, as I said. So thanks you all for joining. Just a couple more minutes while we line up here. Cool, Colleen, so you were telling us, that weather in lovely Boston today. What have you got? I think the thing that I'm always looking for when I talk to folks right now is what's the one show that on Netflix or Hulu that I keep looking over and don't push play on. So tell me what I got to be looking at.
So new show on Hulu that I just got into and I'm now fully obsessed with is Mrs. America.
Ooh.
Little politically driven. So for our political junkies out there, it's about the ERA movement and kind of all the leaders in that. So very much strong female leads in that show, but it's been very interesting and just a different take on it from different perspectives. So highly recommend it. I think there's like 5 episodes out so far and they release it every Wednesday. So
Fantastic. Matt, you're coming up next in just a second, but hey, just once again, thanks everybody for joining us and adapting to new challenges in university recruiting. It's just going to be another minute while we wait for folks and participants to come on here. I see we're already gaining some really great folks to kind of have our panelists share their experiences with. But if you've got questions that you want this team answering and talking about and discussing, please share them with Q&A or through the Q&A in the bottom. And we'll get started in just a minute here to get going. All right, Matt, one more minute before we get started here. Tell me, what's the show my wife and I are missing out on?
I'll do a pitch for actually somebody my wife went to high school with, wrote a book called Little Fires Everywhere that's set in Shaker, Ohio, outside of Cleveland, where she's from. And it's on Hulu now. They've turned it into a mini series, and I would strongly recommend it. It's really well done, produced, acted, and a great storyline.
So good. I just finished that too. Excellent.
All right. So here's what I'm clearly missing out on. I got to get my Hulu subscription renewed. That's where I'm missing out on. All right, just a couple more seconds here, and we're going to get started. I know everybody's got a lot to do. We want to make sure we give some of those laggard attendees a chance to hop on here. So just a few more seconds before we get started. One of the things that I do want to plug as we do jump into this webinar, Doug Hall, who is Comparably's SVP of Business Development, does run an employer brand live webinar every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific. If you want to learn about your storytelling or really how to share about your culture, we'll make sure that you get invited to that as well. And of course, we've done a lot of past webinars with the CEO of Qualtrics, the Chief People Officer at Zoom Video, the President of Mattel last week. And we also have the Chief People Officer of Chipotle coming up next Thursday. So we'll make sure everybody gets all the information they need to kind of share and learn from those experts during this unique time in not just HR, but in business in general. All right, we're going to kick this off now. And the best way to do this is let's kind of learn just a little bit about the folks that are here. I'm Mike Sheridan, COO at Comparably. We're talking about adapting to the new challenges in university recruitment today. This is a webinar and a conversation that Doug and I have had a lot of conversations with customers and potential customers and how they're looking at making some of the changes in their marketplace. It just so happens that and Colleen, this is where they have a lot of expertise. So Matt Spencer, CEO of Suited, please just tell us a little about you and what Suited is.
Sure. So quick background on me: undergrad at Vanderbilt, MBA at USC, and then I joined Houlihan Lokey, the investment bank, through their campus recruiting program. Back in 2007, spent 8 years as an investment banker there doing M&A and capital raising for a variety of different types of companies. And then ultimately took the role of Chief Human Capital Officer for the firm, where I oversaw all of the talent management strategies globally, with a big emphasis, obviously, on recruiting and campus recruiting, given that it's the lifeblood of most, most financial services organizations. It was really in that role that I realized that there were a number of challenges that we as a firm were facing that were not just individual to us, but were shared by all of our peers and even more broadly across the financial and professional services landscape, and ultimately launched Suited as a way to address those challenges in industry relevant ways. And so Suited is an artificial intelligence powered recruiting network that opens access to early career job opportunities in the financial and professional services sectors to a wide range of candidates. And then leveraging technology enables firms to consider those candidates more efficiently, effectively, and equitably.
Oh, fantastic, Matt. And next to you, Colleen, love working with HubSpot clients, mutual clients together. I know you've had a lot of different changes in your department that you're going to talk about today. But kind of tell us what your background and what you've been doing at HubSpot.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Colleen Grant. I'm the Global Campus Recruiting Manager at HubSpot. I'm a career recruiter, so started off in tech recruiting and switched over to campus after 3 or so years, and I've been in it ever since. At HubSpot right now, we have our main campus recruiting programs are based out of our Cambridge office and based out of our at Dublin office. And they're focused on all sorts of hiring, from tech to marketing to MBA, sales, everything in between. The program's gotten pretty big, so we hire interns, co-ops, and rotational program members anywhere from like 250 to 300 a year, depending on what our volume is for that given year, but a whole bunch of students. And in addition to my recruiters overseeing all the hiring of these students and that experience, they also run our entire go-to-campus approach and our go-to-campus modeling, making sure that we're meeting the students where they're at, solving for diversity, inclusion, and belonging within our funnel, and kind of finding those best schools across the globe. So that's a quick rundown on my program and HubSpot.
Cool. Thanks, Colleen. Doug, last but not least.
Yeah, Doug Hall, SVP of Business Development at Comparably. Been in the online recruiting, brand reputation space. Basically, my whole career was part of the original team at Glassdoor back in 2010, and then went on to help build out another startup in our space called Intello. Came on board with Mike and the founder of Comparably in January. I've really spent my whole career, and I'm doing this now again at Comparably, really helping folks understand how to take the voice of their current employees and start that hypothetical conversation with job seekers, with candidates. And that's really where folks are trying to make that all important decision of, hey, where do I go to work after college? Where do I go to work after I've maybe been in the workforce for 2 to 3 years? And it's one of the most important decisions folks make, whether, besides where they live, who they spend their life with, going to work. And so using transparency as a place to help them do that. So excited to be here, excited to add any points that I can, and ready to go, Mike. Thanks for having me. So.
Thanks, Doug. Look, I like to jump right in. As I said, I'm a COO. I think about risk all the time, right? So, outside of just the infection risks of anything on campus, talk to me where you guys, and Colleen, I'd like you to start with this, and we'll get into actual tactics in the next question, but what other risks are employers or students and even universities should they be thinking about when it comes to this campus recruiting process, now that, there really isn't any way for there to be on campus? What can happen in this process that causes issues in that recruiting cycle?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton that we're thinking about right now as it pertains to the process and how we really have to totally change the status quo of it. A lot of what we're running into at the moment is whether or not the universities that we partner with are set up to successfully have us run events virtually. What's their marketing going to be to get students to join virtually? Is there an interest? Is there a need for that? So that's been a big hurdle, because it goes without saying that there's a ton that goes into planning these events, virtual or on campus. So making sure that students are going to show up in the same way, that's a big risk. And it's a risk for my team to dedicate the time to it, our business leaders to join it. That's been a big thing there. I'd say on top of that, something that our company's thinking about, and I've been talking to a ton of other companies about this, what is 2021 really going to look like? No one knows at all right now. So planning out the rest of this year, going into the fall and going into that planning season without really knowing what 2021 is actually going to look like from a hiring standpoint, from an economy standpoint, there's a lot of risks around that as well that we're trying to get on top of and trying to think about. But I think at the end of the day, one thing that we're really trying to keep in mind, no matter what, is providing as much information and insight to students, regardless of what particular opportunities we end up having for them, making sure that they're still getting to know as much as possible about our organization, our company, and what we can provide them, and working as closely as possible with the universities to do that too. I think those are some of the big things that we're thinking about as we go into the fall.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Matt, I think you're going to have a unique perspective on challenges and some risks here in this process. What have you guys been thinking, and how have you been talking with your clients that way?
Yeah, no, it's the right question to ask. And I think when all this started, 6-7 weeks ago, everybody was thinking about their spring process and what spring recruiting looks like and how has it impacted. And I think folks have now recognized that it's, spring quickly turns to summer and summer to fall. And, one of the things that our clients are particularly focused on is as we think about fall recruiting coming up, and, a lot of the experts, absent a vaccine, talk about the possibility of a resurgence of the virus. Whether or not students are back on campus is still a question mark, right? Like, are they even there to be able to take advantage of? And even if they are companies going to risk sending their employees to campuses to go interact, where you've got a whole bunch of students from all over the country and world who have now come back into one place. And then similarly, when you think about, second and final round interviews that might typically be done in offices, are they going to bring students from those campuses into offices and risk potential exposures more broadly across the organization? And so one of the things that we're talking with our clients about is that you need to be thinking about what a potential all virtual or all digital type process looks like. I think it's great having Colleen's perspective here. We work a lot with financial and professional services firms who most of whom have not adapted to a lot of the technology tools and things that are ultimately out there to run those types of virtual process. So it's going to be a huge change for them. And to be able to leverage the time between now and when it really ramps into gear to put in place a thoughtful process, I think is something that folks need to be thoughtful of.
Yeah. And Matt, especially given, the uncertainty in timing, as we've discussed, you've got to get creative here. And one of the things that, I've certainly heard from HubSpot in our conversations with a lot of folks there's a lot of pieces of this that you've really put in place, even pre-pandemic, as you were really looking at a more virtual cycle. So, let's get a little bit tactical here. Without the standard on-campus recruiting events, what are going to be some unique ways that employers should be thinking about, raising this awareness? And in some ways, right, it's also a discovery piece, because it's not that job fair that might happen on campus. Maybe it's not even those regular folks that show up. So how are you going to get known? How do you drive towards that application? And Doug, I kind of want to just start with you here because I think this part of a little bit is the tip of the spear here. I have a pretty big opinion that social media strategies got to be a big component of this in the early stage process. So how should employers be thinking about that? And as Colleen and Matt said, how should the universities be facilitating and supporting some of that?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. So I think even before this pandemic, if you really just look at the numbers, like 80% of students said that they were going to rely on social media or a review site, whether it's a Glassdoor, and Indeed, Comparably, to help them make that determination of where they're going to go to potentially do an internship or for their first job. So that content and that information was already happening. Like, I think other studies show that students and internships, they are going to go try to interact with your brand or with, some form of social media 7 to 10 times before they even decide to take a call with a recruiter to start that initial conversation. So like, that was already happening. So I think now is probably the time, knowing that we have to go to more of a virtual setting to where you need to understand that you're not going to be able to have that personal touch on campus to be able to really to talk about all the great benefits and things that you can provide as an employer. So you're really going to have to double down on your social media channels, being part of the conversation on sites like Glassdoor, Comparably, or Indeed, being creative with how you're interacting with these folks as well. Like, I look at a cool thing that ESPN does every night on SportsCenter. They do a senior grad night, and they highlight student athletes that didn't get the graduation that they typically would have. So how can you as an employer use creative things like that to let folks know, like, we know that you didn't get that typical graduation and we want to help you do that and spotlight that. So I think just thinking of creative and authentic ways that you can get out there in social media, be part of the narrative, don't hide from it, and stay authentic in the way that you're trying to represent what you're doing from a campus and from an internship recruiting standpoint.
Yeah. And Colleen, this tees up, as you guys, as I said, HubSpot really went to a really virtualization in that university recruitment process. And just as Doug said, right, like, I love those graduate experiences on ESPN when they highlight that, because those students didn't have that experience. So how are you thinking about showcasing to potential graduate and undergraduate students what that internship or what that post-college experience is going to be like at HubSpot? How do you get that across and bring that into play?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, something we're really thinking about right now. So I'd start off by saying, just to echo Doug there, our employer brand team is so spectacular when it comes to making sure that, like, our social media is so on point to highlight those right things. It has been huge, hugely beneficial, not only during this, but far before any pandemic came through, of making sure that, like, our HubSpot Life channel has a feature on a current co-op and what they're doing in the day-to-day, and that's recorded, and that's something that we can send out to people. So our social channels have always been a huge push to make sure that students are hearing about us. But it really goes beyond that now, because I think the social channels is what's going to get them hooked, to your point, and get them thinking about your company. And then for HubSpot, we want to take it that extra step of, like, okay, so what are you going to actually do when you get here? How can we educate you about our opportunities? Because we understand that HubSpot as a platform isn't something that's, it's a B2B platform. It doesn't totally make sense to people without learning a little bit more about it. And that's usually what our entire Go to Campus approach is really about, is teaching students more about HubSpot, what we do, and beyond that. So we made, we're in a little bit of a fortunate spot where, going into the 2019-2020 campus season, we actually made some decent adjustments to go more virtual, as just something that we wanted to do anyways, to reach different types of schools, because we are a pretty small team. Our campus team is only 9 people. So we can't go everywhere, but we knew there was a lot more students we wanted to reach. So we had launched on the sales side as a pilot a virtual webinar series. And it was a series where it was monthly. We had a different topic that was covered by our campus sales recruiter in North America. And his name is Vinny. Vinny would bring on people from the business to talk about various things about sales. And the whole theme was that it was demystifying sales. So it's really about educating students about what our opportunity is about, whether that be internship or full-time opportunities. And it's something that people can log into, but then it's also recorded, so they can go back and check that out whenever they want. So that approach was huge, but that really ties back to, again, our social presence and making sure that we're getting that out there and getting it advertised to the right students and at the right schools. And our university partners were so huge in promoting that as well. So that's really where we lean into the universities here. Like, companies are going to be trying, they're going to get creative, and we're going to be leaning on you more than ever to work with us and to promote it for us. And if you feel like it's not working and it's not something that's landing with your students, you need to let us know before it flops. So I think those are some big things. The last thing that I would add in is a little bit more on the tech side. Well, actually, all of our opportunities. HubSpot has what we call HubSpot Academy, and there's a bunch of certifications that students can go on and take about getting certified in marketing, sales, or actually a web application certification that's new from last year. All of those things are really great opportunities too for students to get more insight into what companies have going on and what it would be like to work there, but also have something that you can like toss onto your resume. So those certifications have been a huge help for us in getting student interest and also building up student talent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know you guys have been really progressive in that added learning piece. You know, Matt, talk to me where you have focused on this as you know, really a leader in the HR space, and even more so, you know, as you've gotten into, you know, the world that you are in AI now.
You mean specifically as it relates to driving engagement?
Yeah. Really in that setup of how are you going to get unique ways, especially because you tend to focus more on the investment bankers and larger financial institutions as kind of a core and professional services niche audiences. Some of those are standard folks on campuses, right? And then some other folks may not necessarily be. And so what are the discussions you're helping to make sure there's still that momentum that they can gain when not on campus?
Yeah, I think, look, one of the big things that I would add into the conversation here is that, in particular for firms that maybe don't have the size or the demand need, or maybe the brand awareness to be able to drive, drive candidates on their own. There's a whole, and this will obviously sound a little bit self-serving, but there's a whole group of really great, what I'll call just job board aggregator type things that are out there. And in particular, ones like Suited is, as you mentioned, focused on financial services. They're becoming more and more hyper specialized by industry, whether it's technology, whether it's, investment banking or broadly financial services, et cetera. It's a great way to find students, because oftentimes the way students behave is they want to do tech. And so they're going to focus on applying to a number of different tech firms. If they want to do investment banking, they're not just doing one investment bank and then saying, hey, I'm going to go and apply to technology firms. Now, they may be doing all of those things. But if you think about kind of the power that comes with network effects of some of those, job aggregators, as I will call them, that are built around industries like that, it can be a really great way for firms to be able to access and identify a wide range of people who are interested in jobs in that particular industry, which then makes the job of marketing why your firm to that candidate a little bit easier, because you've already, got them at least part of the way there.
Got it. That makes sense to me. Look, I want to take a next step in kind of some of this recruiting cycle. Before I do that, if you've got questions, for our panelists here, please pull up the Q&A, add them, ask your question. We'll make sure to go through that. There's a great team here that we're, we want to be a resource for you. And I know they want to share, what's on your mind going on in the marketplace and how they can help. The step that I want to take is kind of this next step from an employer standpoint, that assessment aspect of things, right? And, we've heard a lot of clients, and as Colleen said, the HubSpot team has gone much more towards virtualization. They've done some pretty interesting things when it comes to certification aspects. But you've got hiring managers that used to be on campus, or recruiters that are used to being on campus, and they're not going to be able to assess human-wise the same way that they've done historically. So how is technology, and Matt, I'll start with you from an AI perspective really going to help there? What advantages, what limitations, are going to come with this? And I also want to make sure, this is a process that can't lose with the human touch, can't lose that human touch. So how do they complement one another in this world?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I'll start by saying that when we think about the use of artificial intelligence in this problem, we think of it as an enablement tool, not a replacement tool. Mike, as you said, there is no replacement for that human interaction as the kind of final end all be all. But that being said, leveraging technology, you can create a substantial amount of efficiency in the process and allow the people who are participating in that process to focus on much more higher value components of it. And so when we think about, artificial intelligence, there's lots of different ways that it gets deployed in a recruiting process, everything from intelligent candidate searches to resume matching, or to what we do, which is the predictive hiring side of it. And in particular, what we think of the advantages of artificial intelligence are that it is very adept at dealing with high volume, and it can consider substantially more variables than even most humans can, at least in the normal course of a recruiting process. And so when you bring those components together and you think about what does that mean in a digital-oriented hiring process, in particular, if you may not be able to have that human-to-human touch, or if it's facilitated over video conference, which as good as video conferencing and video interviewing technologies are, there is an element that's lost, right? And so that's where we believe that leveraging the combination of both artificial intelligence as well as assessment science can help capture and fill in some of those gaps, help you get a better understanding of candidates, better understanding of future potential, and leveraging those things. Now, with that, I'll go ahead and give the appropriate caveat, as we were chatting about the other day, that you have to be careful about just saying we're going to start using artificial intelligence, because as many great things as it can do, there are also pitfalls that can ultimately come with it if you don't do it the right way. And that can be everything from the potential to either perpetuate or even institute bias into a process and insert it into a process. And in particular, trying to use artificial intelligence for what I'll call more low volume or highly specialized positions can be a little bit of a red herring. And the important thing about all of it is that artificial intelligence has to be trained. It has to be trained on a data set to do whatever it is that you ultimately want. And when you think about that, the data set that you're training those algorithms on, you have to be sure that, while artificial intelligence in and of itself isn't biased, the training set might be. And so you've got to be really conscious about how you ultimately look at deploying those types of technology. But when done correctly, it can be a huge accelerant to any type of a recruiting process or talent objectives that somebody may have.
Colleen, is that something that you at HubSpot, how have you looked at kind of some of the AI tools that are out there? And certainly, like, you've grown in volume pretty significantly, whether this is, both at the university and early career level, or even through a mature career, right? Eventually, people have been, looking at AI. How is HubSpot, and how are you thinking about that in your process?
Yeah, I would say that this past year was the first time that my team stopped and took a second and were like, this volume's getting crazy. And, going through thousands of resumes a season, and, hundreds a day for recruiters, it's getting to be very much out of control. And it's, to echo what Matt said there, it's a tough balance. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm like super ready to have HubSpot have like a full AI process for the top of our funnel. But figuring out that middle ground is definitely something that we need to start thinking about as we continue to grow into a bigger and bigger program, hopefully. But I would say outside of that, there are still so many technologies that we do use to help assist with our process and assist with our vetting process, which is incredibly important, especially right now, especially when we can't go to campus. Things like, one-sided video interviewings that I know that any student watching right now is probably like, no, those are the worst, and they are the worst, and I get it. They're super awkward, super uncomfortable, but so, so helpful in the interview process. So things like that, things like coding assessments, obviously those aren't going anywhere. All of those we've actually used for a while in assisting our process. And to be honest, it wasn't until this probably the first half of 2019 that we started flying in all of our entry-level candidates. Before that, it was done 100% virtually over Zoom for our interviews. And what we found then is that our close rate of candidates that actually came on site was higher. They felt more connected to the process, being, face-to-face with potential future colleagues. So I think going into this year, though, what we're going to have to do is not pretend like we're doing the same thing. We're not. In calling out, like, this is different. We need to adapt here, and we understand that this isn't as comfortable or the process that everybody would want, but we need to be as adaptable as possible. And saying that directly to our student candidates, saying it directly to our hiring managers, and just kind of getting everyone on the same page that, like, hey, this is the new normal, at least for the next year, because we don't feel comfortable, sending people to campus. We don't feel comfortable flying people back and forth because, we know that students, if we say that we want you to come on site and interview on site, they're just going to say yes because they're going to be excited about it. And it really is more up to us to make sure that we're keeping safety top of mind and doing the best that we can. So I think to round that back all up, it's having that conversation, being transparent about why we're making the decisions we are, and that it isn't normal and that we wish it could be different. The other thing that we're making sure we're doing in conjunction with that, go to the HubSpot Live social channels, you'll see a lot more virtual interactions, like interactive virtual tours of our offices. We're getting those up there so they feel a little bit more connected. A lot of day in the life of people, always doing different features there, again, to make sure they're feeling more connected, and a ton of resources about what it means to interview, to submit applications and interview virtually for positions, whether that be entry level or beyond. This is going to be different for everybody. So calling that out and making sure that candidates know that they're not alone in that. And, it's just as uncomfortable for us, and we don't like that either. And we don't want to be doing that either, but we're trying to do the best that we can. So really just like level setting with everybody has been, I think so far what we've seen from our candidates is they've been super appreciative of it. So we're going that right into the campus season in the fall too.
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna throw a little bit of a curveball, based on some of the things that you said, Colleen. And thank you for the participant question or attendee questions here. Keep them coming. I'm gonna get to them after this next question here. Colleen, I want to drill down on this, and Doug and Matt, I think you both have pretty good experience here as well. But Colleen, based on what you just said, I want to touch on it. Like, look. These changes, right, both from whether it's Zoom video or, or all of the tours that we're doing, this is a different way that recruiters are having to execute, right? And,
yep.
We were going to dig in later on this and, hey, what's the actual process? But right now, based on what you said, I think it's really good to dive in. How are you preparing hiring managers for this? How are you preparing recruiters for this? There's going to be hiccups because they've got to converse with students and expectation. They've got to make, adjustments of, hey, things can go wrong in this process, right? So how are you preparing everybody around this space now? Because there's just a lot of bumps in this. And Colleen, you go first. Matt, I'd love your thoughts. And then Doug, your thoughts there as well.
Yeah, so we have, there's been quite literally like a million things just went through my mind of what we're doing and how we're preparing. The number one thing, though, is being as transparent as possible with every single person that's involved. I think a lot of the time students assume that employers are holding cards close to their chest, and we, don't want to show you behind the curtain because who knows what's going on back there. That's really not the case. We want to give you as much information as possible when we can and when we have it. And the same goes for hiring managers. Our hiring managers at HubSpot are so dedicated to our program, so spectacular, and just really, really want to make it work. So constant communication, even if it's really not pretty. I think that I've always been the type of person that wants to deliver something in like a perfect little package and be like, and here's the full plan, and it's totally going to work and nothing's going to go wrong. That's not the case right now. So just being like, all right, I got this one answer for you because I know you're waiting for that. I'm still waiting for these 15 answers, but I'm figuring it out. Being as open and transparent about how we're handling that has been massively helpful. The other thing is really giving as many people as possible the opportunity to share ideas, to poke holes in things. So here at HubSpot, we have a woman, her name is Megan. She runs our remote programming. So probably a year ago now, a little over a year ago now, HubSpot made a big push to allowing more remote opportunities for employees just in general, which again, really got us ready to be able to be a fully remote company the way that we are for the time being. But Megan has put so much into place when it comes to like how to support an interview process, how to make sure that you're solving, how to make sure you're thinking about the fact that someone's, not getting that personal interaction. So she's also put a ton together of just resources. I think that people want to know as much as they can know. So making sure that we're providing all of that, that has really been hugely helpful. And also just making sure that people know that no one has all the answers, because no one's ever done this before. We're in a completely different world. So having that level of empathy for each other and just taking a step back and being like, okay, we're figuring this out. We're going to get your answers when we can, and that's okay. So that has been a big leading factor here for our entire process and how we're setting up for students in particular.
Yeah, and Matt, I think this is, look, the way AI works and your technology, it's just a different experience, for even in students and the recruiter side of that. How are you guys thinking and working with clients to prepare the recruiters? And this is a different process than, of course, now there's a pandemic, right? So it's even a more different process through this. How is that working, and what things come up, and how are you overcoming those?
Yeah, so I think Colleen's spot on with everything that she talked about there. The one thing I would add to it is and I touched on this a little bit before, that in a virtual process where everything's done via video, yes, you want to make sure that everything's prepared and kind of buttoned up, and train your people on what to expect and what to do. Even things like technology hiccups that can have this bad thing where people naturally want to say, oh, it must have been the other person's fault or the other person's computer, right? We all have that moment. They were the one who dropped the call or couldn't get it to work, whatnot. Even just like, recognizing that it's not going to be a perfect situation and that problems will come up, and not to let that become something that influences decision-making. The big thing that I see though is, which I touched on before, was that with the video interviewing, there is an element that's lost, right? It's easy to get questions answered and to communicate certain things, but a lot of times things like your nonverbal cues, the emotional components of it, and really gauging somebody's actual personality versus how their personality appears, over an interaction like we're doing right now, can be difficult. And we really do believe, certainly COVID was not the situation that we envisioned when we were launching Suited as being the use case for it. But we do believe that adding, personality or other psychometric type assessments to the equation is particularly important in this time, because it can help add another dimension to the evaluation of what's going on there. The one other thing that I would say, and this is less, what to add to the equation, but more how to think about the process, is I think that one of the things that's going to happen in this recruiting cycle is, because people are forced off of campus, it means that they're no longer constrained by the number of campuses that they can go to, which means that now the world is much bigger that they can consider. If you're going to consider candidates from 20 campuses before, you can do 200 now, right? With no real extra cost in doing it. And I think that's to find a silver lining in an otherwise gray cloud here, right? That is a pretty powerful thing that will enable companies to now, where before they, in particular in our industry, in investment banking and financial services, the recruiting process is hyper competitive. All the banks are going to the same schools. It's fast, got to get it done quick and be done. Otherwise, there's not going to be any talent available. Well, the reality is there's incredibly talented students at every school around the country and globe. It's just very difficult to go find them. And we think that in this environment, companies are now actually going to be able to open up to that opportunity more. And it is a place where leveraging tools like artificial intelligence to deal with that added volume can help. And when you alleviate that pressure, and I know it's a long-winded answer, But when you can alleviate some of that timing pressure because there is more talent available that you can consider, what it means is you can also slow down, right? You can slow your process down, be more thoughtful, build in feedback loops and check-ins. You don't have to worry about all the talent being sucked out before you get it all done. And so I think putting a less of a rush to get it all done and an appropriate pace to do these things in a much more thoughtful and structured way will help people yield really strong results.
It's a really good point, Matt. Doug, I was gonna come at you with an answer to this question, but we actually have a panelist or an attendee question that I think I'd like you to kind of tackle first, because this is something that a lot of companies are facing right now. And so, what do you think companies that are put on hiring freezes or had to do maybe some small layoffs, how are they going to maintain that relationship with students, right, as well as schools through this process, right? And so what are the folks that have spent a lot of time building up their brand, their talent pools, et cetera, now they're not in that place of hiring, right? What do they gotta be doing, and how should companies be thinking about that?
Yeah, I think you need to double down on those efforts. So I agree with Matt. Like, I not only has the opportunity with technology and AI to go out to more campuses and expand the schools that you're going to be able to go after, but what this another silver lining in this crisis has done is more companies are going to now allow more people to work remotely. So they're going to be able to go recruit talent from other states, countries that they maybe wouldn't before. So the talent pool that you're going to be able to go after, and maybe your competition that you're competing for talent for, maybe before COVID, they were, hey, you have to come into the office every day type of business. And after COVID, they've realized, hey, we can still do business remote. So their candidate pool has expanded. So I think to your point, Mike, like, even if you're in a hiring freeze, if you aren't hiring right now, I would be truthful and authentic about that with folks that are reaching out to you or engaging with you on talent networks, but also those folks that you would have typically hired now, but you can't. Build a relationship with them. Continue to push content with them, whether it's via email, social, at least get their email address, own all those different things. The other thing that I think would help that most people don't think about most often is owning their SEO as well. I think owning social is important, but especially for younger generations and millennials, they're doing more and more searches on companies like, what's their diversity like? What's their mission statements? What are the CEOs like? So owning that search component as more and more of the social aspects of what it's like to work at a company become more important to students, I think is also important to have your SEO driven to what you're trying to tell in your story as well too. So to your point, Mike, like, I would double down on it. I know that your team might be smaller and you maybe have lost some folks on your team, but continue to push content, to be authentic with it, like to Colleen's point, and continue to over communicate with your recruiting market, your candidates, as you're going through this time, even if you're in a hiring freeze.
Yeah, and before I jump to you and Colleen or Matt about this, like the one point, and I talk about this a lot with companies, this is a time, if your candidate experience and touch point and communication with your talent pool isn't and hasn't been optimal, this is not a time to let that lay by the wayside. This is a time to enhance that. And I think what you've heard from Colleen and Doug, which I agree with, and Matt support as well, like, this is a time to just be transparent about what you are. It builds trust within that talent pool. And who knows, the thing that you want to leave with that brand aspect of things is you want to leave people with a great experience. And it may be like, hey, I didn't help you with a position here, but even folks that come through our talent funnel at Comparably, I always look to see if there's other places that I can find them opportunities if they're not the right fit for us. And so I know large scale companies don't necessarily have that opportunity, but I do believe that build that talent pool through transparency and frequent communication. Colleen, I don't want to just take and suck all that airtime, but is there anything else that you might add to that freeze aspect and can maintaining that talent pool?
Absolutely. So, we at HubSpot, we are still hiring as an organization. There are various positions that we're hiring for. And to be honest, this actually isn't a time of year where we usually hire a ton of entry-level people anyways. We usually do it a little bit earlier in the year and in the fall. So this hasn't hit the campus world as much, but I've had multiple conversations with our stakeholders across the company. One of our sales leaders, his name's Tom in particular, he was really pushing me. He's like, okay, great. So like, foot's not off the gas here. Like, what are we doing to get ready for the fall? How are we building up a pipeline? Even if we don't know exactly when or what that position is going to be, it's more important than ever to push that and push it, I guess, in a virtual way, right? So it's going to be a different approach. You have to adapt to it, but that's completely fine. There's also a lot of tools out there that are helping us do that on top of our social media. And I know I saw in the chat that was asking about something about a resource in particular. So we use Handshake for that a lot too, to communicate with students and to promote our events. Their events feature, there's tons of students on there and tons of universities on there. So that can be a really great way where universities and companies can work together in making sure that the ball is not dropped, your brand on campus is just as strong. Even if, one of the schools that we work with all the time, because we're in Boston, is Northeastern. Even if I'm doing an event that isn't just for Northeastern, I want to make sure Northeastern's involved in that and can hear about any of these things that we're talking about, any of the webinars that we're doing with students. So using Handshake for that is a huge double-sided platform where it's kind of a one-stop shop for everyone to make sure that we're promoting that and promoting the brands and getting the opportunities in front of the students. So that's one thing I would add there.
Cool. Matt, any addition before I get to the next panelist question?
The only thing I would add is just the observation that life is long, and you never know. I mean, it's not like any employment branding efforts that you put out to this particular class that you may not be hiring because of a hiring freeze. That you never know, like, who sees that, who a year or two from now comes over as an experienced hire or a lateral hire, or who they talk to about, the next opportunity. And I saw this really cool company. And so, I think Gen Zers are much more inclined to engage in some sort of digital or social media type presence anyway. This is a great opportunity for companies to really lean into that because they're forced to do it. And to not rely on the classic go to campus strategy, which, by the way, I think is still like an important strategy when we're actually able to affect it. I think it's an important component, but it's highly unlikely this fall that there are going to be many companies doing that. And so I think taking advantage of that time to put in place that sort of digital outreach strategy, that employment branding marketing, using tools like Comparably and some of the others that have been mentioned over the course of the discussion. Now's the time to do it. And even if you're not hiring, do it anyway, because you never know who sees it now and what that's going to come out for later. So.
Yeah, it makes so sense. Matt, I might just come back to you here on this one and cycle back. This is a question from one of our attendees. It is, what are some trends you're all experiencing with the Gen Z and entry-level candidates that are looking for jobs? And how should we be thinking about, pre-pandemic, the recruiting and retaining of those folks was very different than what I think is going to be on the other side. I even know and talk to companies pretty frequently, their response and how they treated employees during the pandemic is, number one, going to be key on that retention side of things, but it's also going to be one of the key things in how talent managers and hiring managers and recruiters answer, because it's going to be one of the first questions that comes up in that recruiting conversation and interview. What other things are might you think about, or can you share with this group that might be a trend or something you might identify to really help them think about recruiting and retain that they may not be thinking about today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, every generation we talk about how they're culture driven, it's every single one successively, and what they're looking for may be a little bit different, but very much, I think Gen Zers we find care a lot about the company that they're going to go work for and feeling like they fit there. The other thing that I think is really interesting to think about is, in a lot of ways, companies are getting a preview of what Gen Zers want out of, job flexibility right now, with this forced work from home, distributed workforce idea. And I think that is a good view as to what that ultimately looks like. Being able to work remotely, live where you want to live, but still be able to be value added. A lot of those things, I think, are some of what we have been hearing for the past couple of years are becoming more and more in focus and more in vogue. And I actually would love Colleen's perspective on this, because I think HubSpot and other members of the tech community are usually the tip of the spear in terms of thinking about a lot of these more cultural oriented elements and disruptive workforce ideas. But that's that would be my immediate thing is take a look at what's happening right now. And while, this isn't a permanent idea, enabling this type of an environment and work environment is a little bit more of what this generation has in mind as they think about the course of their careers.
Yeah, I completely agree. I started at HubSpot almost 5 years ago, and the shift that I've seen in the demand from students and what they're asking about has completely changed. For HubSpot, students have always asked about the culture, but the way that they ask about the culture is very different. They want to know from the first time they talk to a recruiter what their manager is going to do to invest in their personal growth. Like, specifically, what are you going to do to make sure that I'm growing as an individual in your company? Because even if this is my first job out of college and it's supposed to be, just like a learning opportunity, it's not. It's your first opportunity to really grow, and how can you do that at a company that you believe in is a huge tone that they're setting. Also, how valued are they going to be? What's the quality of the work that I'm going to be able to do? What's the access that I'm going to have? I don't want to be put in a corner to do something that's not going to benefit the organization. And so how am I going to have access to do that? And I think during this time, during a pandemic, you're seeing that even more so. Like, how do we value our employees? How are we going to make sure that they don't miss a beat despite craziness happening? How are we going to reinvest in them growing? That is I'm proud to say, a constant conversation at my company's executive level that they keep talking to us about, making sure that they are thinking about that. They are investing in us. They do want us to continue to grow and learn. So when we're able to talk to candidates about that, at the student level in particular, it's really what kind of locks them in, gets them interested, and it is authentic, and they can feel that. The other way I would say that we're able to do that is through those features of employees that talk about their own experiences. I think at the end of the day, people don't really want to hear from recruiters that much. Recruiters have a job to do. They have to fill our positions. So the more that we have we set up our candidates with, people that are in the jobs that they're going to do, like get a firsthand experience, hear from them. Going into this new world, that's going to be more important than ever, of like setting up those calls, making sure they're talking to someone who's actually done the job so that they feel more connected to it. Because those are definitely some big shifts that we're seeing, and students want to know that they're going to be valued and that they're going to grow.
Doug, I'm sure you've got some thoughts here.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest trends, and especially for Gen Z and for folks, is that they really trust information from the employees themselves way more than anything what the employer can put out there. So the more that, to Colleen's point, that you can get your employees talking about your culture, what you're doing in the local community, what you're doing socially as an organization, and using your employees to be the mouthpiece and really getting out there and telling your story for you, that's what Gen Zs are looking for. It's one thing for you as the employer to say it, but if your employees are actually backing that up and saying, to Colleen's point, like when they do have that phone call with the person that's going to be in that role and it backs it up, that's huge. So the more that you can give them access to what the current employees are saying about the organization, not just about the job, but like what the culture is like, what the social responsibility is of the company is going to be. Mission statements are huge right now. Like the amount of times that Gen Zers search for information about a mission statement about a company is a big trend that's happening right now as well too. So I think leveraging your authentic voice of what your employees are saying is also really important from a storytelling standpoint. Wherever you're trying to tell that story, whether it's on your career site, social, through email, however you're doing it, tell an authentic story from what your current employees are saying and experiencing is a real big trend I'm seeing.
Yeah, I totally get that, Doug. And we're in the last few minutes, so I do want to make a point. Everything around what people are doing to support the community, help grow their employees, help them grow both professionally, how they're growing socially, how they're giving back, right? Those are all things that we hear, see from research and storytelling that are becoming more and more important. And, all three of you have been a part of that storytelling, previously for companies and the people you work with now. There's a couple of quick rapid fire questions as we're in the last 5 minutes, and thank you, all three of you, for your time today. There's a bunch of things that people want to know from a technology standpoint that both companies and even the universities, right, in supporting it. So one of the questions, and Matt, Colleen, feel free to jump in here. What programs or tools, and this is a question from an attendee, do you recommend for tracking student resumes? Is there anything that you can give a tip on that is a tech stack that is important, especially, Matt, as you said, right, there's an expansion of where companies are going to go to recruit from. What are programs that those companies need to be prepared for, but the universities need to be prepared for in dealing with new people that are trying to recruit on their campus?
You want to jump
Colleen,
in that?
you go for it. You start.
Okay. So the tech stack that we use right now that I think universities should get their students ready for is we have the one-sided video interviews. So making sure that they understand that they're gonna have to do that. That's awkward. It's kind of weird. Then we use Greenhouse is our applicant tracking system. So it's no different for students than it is for anyone else. Greenhouse is our single source of truth at HubSpot. We do have, we use Handshake too. So we're a partner of Handshake where you can go, and if you're a partner of them, you can find resumes and track them through there too. They actually integrate with Greenhouse, which is why it works so well. So that's our tech stack for keeping track of everybody.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think there's, there are multiple choices for the companies when it comes to ATS. There's a couple of choices for the university side of it, Handshake being probably the largest one. The one thing that I would say overall, as you think about technology, that you're going to see more and more is that video interviewing piece, whether it's the one-sided video interviews that Colleen was talking about, or even just Zoom enabled or other video interviewing available technologies. And the one advice that I would give to career center professionals and university administrators is talk to your students about how to prepare for a video interview. It's very different than sitting across the table from somebody and being able to do it. Whether it's one-sided or dual, it's different. And that's going to be the way of not just this year. That's something that's been trending over the last several years. You just got, gasoline thrown on the fire with the COVID pandemic here and being forced to do it, and it's not going to go away. So start really leaning into prepping people for how to do that.
Got it. And one last question. Have you guys seen or how are you thinking about virtual conferences or virtual career fairs? And this comes from Rebecca, one of our attendees. Colleen, you want to start there?
Yeah, I'm speaking at a virtual conference next week, and I have no idea how it's going to go. To be totally honest, I'm not crazy about career fairs as it is. Just status quo. I don't think that they're a great way to connect with students. So virtually, I don't really think that's something we're going to be pursuing too much either. And same goes for conferences. We are thinking about conferences on a one-off basis, of course, ones that make sense for us. But more so than ever, we're going to be very picky about what's worth our time, how are they setting up to make sure it's going to be most beneficial. So it's going to be a tough sell this year if we're investing in those types of resources.
Well, Matt, what if our financial firms, is that historical place they spend time on conferences or job fairs, and how they think about that?
Not really. So they not so much on the conferences or job fairs. I think the classic way in financial services is you go and you do the traditional kind of on-campus corporate presentation at your target schools and things like that. I do know a number of firms are talking about how to enable that virtually, which obviously there can be some efficiencies too, because you're not locked into to only one school at a time. So I could see that sort of kind of one-on-one, like single firm engagement being something that takes way virtually versus a broader, participant at a huge, conference with a bunch of different companies. I think companies tend to do better when they can tell their story the way that they want to and in their own vacuum. So.
Got it. Great point and totally understood. Look, we've spent an hour together. Thank you so much for everyone that asked questions and joined us today for adapting to new challenges in university recruiting. Matt, Colleen, Doug, you guys were awesome. Thank you all so much for your time and sharing your experience with everybody. Thank you all for attending. Do not miss Doug's Employer Brand Live tomorrow, which the link is in the Zoom chat if you want to learn more about how to tell your story. Doug is your guy there. And of course, we'll follow up, Matt and Colleen, with all the resources that you guys shared today. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye. Thanks,
Okay,
Matt.
everyone.
Thanks,
Stay
Colleen.
safe.
Nice to meet you.